Do you know what is crazy? I mean, like I listen to a Britney Spears track probably at least 3 to 4 times a week.
Really?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. Thank you for joining us on this lovely and warm Friday. Well, my iPad died as the music was playing. That was it. That was the 1%. All right. Well, sorry, listeners. We'll just abruptly jump into the episode. Welcome from the podcast dungeon here at Casa de Melson. Joining me, of course, is Mr. Melson.
What's up, dude?
Hello, Scott. How are you this fine Friday?
It is too damn hot.
It is. I noticed it's going to be a little cooler next week.
Yeah, it looks like next week mostly in the mid 80s, maybe some high 80s. Looks like it's also going to rain every day. What would be nice would be like low to mid 80s with sun and, not humidity.
Right, yeah. This is the second week in a row now. We've started the episode with a podcast or with a weather report. So,
I've got several patients that have recently moved to Oklahoma from California for various reasons, and it is interesting because and I should say there are various reasons that people have moved, but I do have some patients that have explicitly said that they have moved from Oklahoma to California because they wanted to live in a conservative state as opposed to commie California, as they call it.
California has more Republican voters than Oklahoma.
I mean, that's true, but I don't think as a share of the population.
But honestly, there's that movement to separate California into 5 states.
Yeah.
And it's not moving very fast.
3
but
of them would be Republican.
Yeah, I mean, so like Northern California, what is like? It's like the 5th most Republican state if you divided it out. Like it's
totally. And honestly, most of the patients that I have moved to Oklahoma from Northern California, and it's just funny because they're like, yeah, I've got to get to Oklahoma, wait, because all the liberals out in California. But then they'll come in my office and they're like, man, Dr. Melson, I've never had allergies before in my life, but they just ever since I was like, yeah, that's a thing here. Then they'll come and they're like, is the weather always like this? And I'm like, no, it gets hotter.
Right, yeah.
And they're like,
it gets worse in whatever direction you don't like.
Yeah. And they're like, when is fall? And I'm like, well,
Thursday.
The leaves will change in about October, but then in November it'll be cold and wet and icy as shit.
Yeah. The leaves will begin to turn, then fall off, except for last year in which they got coated with ice and the world ended.
Yeah. And so then it's like, glad you're here. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
But, I mean, was it worth it to move from one of the greatest climates literally in the world just so you can live somewhere where, like, you can buy big guns?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if it is, great.
Well, so last week my mother-in-law was in Seattle visiting her friend, and she came back and she was like, oh, the weather was just lovely the whole time. I wish we had that. And then today I had a call with a woman in Seattle, and you know what's going to be like this weekend?
Freaking hot.
15 degrees hotter than it is in Oklahoma.
I mean, longtime listeners will know that I love Canada. I'm obsessed with British Columbia. And there was a time a couple of years ago we went where I was like obsessively watching the weather because I was just like, this is complete bullshit because the week we're going to be there in August, the highs in Oklahoma are like 72 and the highs in like the mountains of British Columbia look like they're going to be 95.
Yep.
And I was like, I feel cheated.
Yeah.
But fortunately it did not happen that way.
I went to San Diego for a conference one time, and it was like 85, 87. And I was like, this isn't so bad. I was walking around, and the locals were just like, oh, my gosh, this heat wave. And I was like, okay, no wonder everyone wants to live in San Diego. Anywho, we should get into some Oklahoma political and governmental news. But first, let's start with health news. COVID-19. I almost said COVID-20, but
I mean,
at this point, it's all the same. Cases are increasing in Oklahoma and around the country. Oklahoma has roughly double the number of new diagnoses since the beginning of June. So that's went from like 90 to 199 or something like that in the past month, as on the 7-day rolling average. I'll say that. So that's how many new cases per day. It's likely due to the Delta variant, right, Scott? But because there's an outbreak, I guess, in Missouri that is known to be of the Delta variant, But in Oklahoma, we can't know for sure because we are dead last for genomic sequencing with just 0.19%. So,
Definitely suboptimal.
yeah, um, so good news, right, is that vaccinated folks are not contracting the virus. But Oklahoma only has about 37% of folks vaccinated, which I guess means that there's a lot of people out there who are, we'll say, eligible to get the virus.
Yeah. I mean that's 100%. And I feel a little. I'm like, I think I just had a little like a flashback because we're gonna have to start having COVID updates again every week because the situation is getting worse now instead of better.
Yeah.
It's like, God damn it! Like I thought we were.
I texted Paul Money to Oklahoma Watch, and I was like, "Hey man, looks like there's outbreaks in Missouri and Colorado and Arkansas. Not yet here, but it's coming." He was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, I just I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but the one in South West Missouri is bad. I mean, it's real bad.
yeah,
Like there's hospitals there that are ICU. You know, there's over 100 patients in the hospital with COVID. 37% of them or so are in the ICU. ICUs are filling up. There's ICUs in Colorado that are full of COVID. Like it's not over. But the thing is, it can be over. And you know,
well, because almost all the cases are
Yes.
people who were unvaccinated.
I mean, like literally, like 99% or more of cases that we're diagnosing now, and particularly cases that are severe enough to warrant hospitalization or result
Yeah.
in death, are, I mean, like almost exclusively patients that are unvaccinated. And so, you know, on the one hand, like if you're listening to this show, I would guess that the odds are pretty good that you're vaccinated. That seems like our demo is probably in the
Right,
high vaccine
Pro-vax. Yeah.
high vaccine group. But I'll just guarantee you, every single person who's listening to this right now knows multiple people who haven't gotten the shot, and every single person right now has someone in multiple people within their sphere of influence who haven't gotten the shot. And it is imperative that you reach out to those people and talk to them on whatever level you're comfortable with, or tell them to talk to their doctor to get vaccinated. Because what you don't want, right, is you
To get it.
Yeah. Well, what you don't want is you don't want Delta right now, which we appear to have pretty good protection from if you're vaccinated, particularly if you're vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine. We really don't want that to change. Now, I was just reading a thread from Helen Branswell on Twitter before we started the show. There are multiple, like lots of people that are working on boosters. CDC and FDA have not come out and said yet whether they think boosters are necessarily going to be, whether we're going to have boosters or not, but they are actively working on it. I suspect we probably will need a booster at some point. And so that's something that is like ongoing, but it ain't next week. It ain't tomorrow, and hopefully we don't need it next week. But just please, if you have people in your life that you can influence to get the shot, please tell them to get the shot. You can tell them they can.
We should have used Delta Dawn as our theme music
We
here.
should have used Delta Dawn as our theme music. You can even, if you've got folks that aren't vaccinated and they're on Twitter, you can tell them, message me on Twitter. I will answer their questions about the vaccine to the best of my ability over Twitter. Not Facebook though. Don't Facebook me.
It's tough because, like you, I'm sure I have friends who have relatives, parents even, who refuse to get the vaccine. And I wonder, if we see a clear increase among people who are unvaccinated, and it's like, listen, I mean, we saw headlines this week where it's like all COVID cases or nearly all COVID cases are among the unvaccinated. Like it is a clear thing. And people start dying again, then I think we might start to see a slow shift, right? Hopefully it's fast, but maybe it's slow.
Yeah, but that's COVID. It's still here. It's getting worse. Get your shot if you haven't.
Get your shot.
So the Board of Regents met this week for Board of Regents for Higher Education.
Mm-hmm.
They met on, what was that, Monday? Yeah?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. They increased tuition and fees. So
College students who are listening,
yeah,
both of you,
getting more expensive.
but not that much, right? Only like $250 a year.
I mean, I don't know if I ever heard anybody say only in $250.
Well, I'm not saying it's nothing. I will say the regents, described it as basically 1 month of groceries, and I was like, "There's no college kids paying $250 a month for groceries."
Yeah, I mean that's that's true. I just anytime I see the universities increasing tuition, it makes me angry.
Well, no one likes it. The thing to me that was particularly odd about this, now the timing is just coincidental, but as I think we mentioned last week, NonDoc is suing the University of Oklahoma because they have not yet released the reports, these two reports from the Jones Day law firm, right? So one report is about allegations of sexual misconduct by former President David Boren. The other report by the same law firm is about allegations of fiscal mismanagement at the university, specifically falsified or fudged fundraising reports. Now, I have often heard it said that President Boren was a voracious fundraiser. That he could raise money like nobody's business. I've heard that from folks inside and outside the university.
Agree.
And so the thing is, it sounds like they added some zeros to some of those pledges. And so it's just weird. The thing I think to me, you never underestimate someone's ability to like mess things up, right? So it's like, the same week they're getting sued because they won't release their report that says, presumably, that
How they mismanaged their money.
that they didn't raise as much money as they said they did, and then they also have to raise tuition, right? Where it's like, well, how short of money are you?
Well, so that's a great point. I get wound up about this because I paid a lot of money for my education at both the undergraduate and graduate level, and that's fine. But I also am acutely aware of how much education costs have gone up since, say, like the 70s or 80s. I mean, and the percentages are just astronomical. I remember talking with family members that talking about when they went to college in the 70s, how they were going to college, also working full time. And by working full time while going to college, they were making enough money to both pay their tuition and send money home to their family and take care of themselves. And it's just like, take care of themselves? I'm going to sound like Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley. Take care of themselves. And I worked not full time in college, but I worked 20 to 30 hours a week almost all through college at various jobs. And I don't see how that's possible, right? College costs, like tuition costs, have gone up so much. They rapidly outpace inflation. And it's not clear to me if the value of the education has gone up that much.
That's
right?
a good question.
And so, like, when you look at, there's lots of data showing the way that lifetime earnings increase with a college degree, but I don't know that earnings increase. I don't know if that has gone up commensurate with tuition increases, and in fact, I think it may have gone down since the 70s and 80s. And so, I just wonder: are students paying more and getting less? And so, if I was a student at OU, I would want to know, like, why is it going to cost $248 a year more? Like, what is happening to the university's costs that they're having to keep?
Well, but they haven't raised it for like several years.
I thought they'd raised it like 3 years ago.
Four. Several is 4.
I mean,
I don't know how much how much the increase was then, but yeah. So
that's a big deal. And there's just a lot to watch going on in Norman, and unfortunately, a lot of it's off the football field.
I wonder we should do an episode about transparency, not just because I'm director of Freedom of Information in Oklahoma, but because there's some important things happening, particularly on behalf of journalists in our state. So I wonder if we could get Trey Savage or Katie Beth Gardner on here.
We should go do a live pod from outside the next Board of Regents meeting.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
We should just lie. We should just be doing a live pod the whole time the Regents are meeting. They meet for like 12 hours. We should just the whole time, and then just have a bottle of whiskey and just be like, we're gonna sit here drinking whiskey till you guys come out.
Well, I talked to Trace the other day. I think we should do a crossover pod in the News Dungeon with their podcast, which is
great.
Live from the News Dungeon. We could do it on closed caption television from your dungeon to theirs. From our dungeon to yours.
Or, hey, if we're all vaccinated, we can just do it all together.
I think we're all vaccinated. We can do it together. All right. So speaking of audits and reports and such,
Oh yeah.
this week the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, Loft,
The loft.
Loft, released a report that says that it questions the effectiveness of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, or TSET.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I'm shocked and dismayed to find out that the group appointed by the legislature to look at fiscal transparency and the effectiveness of spending went to TSET and said, we don't think that this money is well spent. I cannot imagine that the legislature's hand-picked group looked at TSET and said, this is bullshit.
TSET, who, listeners, you may remember that last year the legislature sent a ballot measure, State Question 814, to the ballot, asking voters to give the legislature more access to the TSET funds. Voters rejected the measure.
And it wasn't close.
Yeah, it was pretty handedly. And now that they're coming after them, being like, well, you know what? We don't even know what you're doing anything.
the voters were like, look, I don't know if TSET does a great job spending this money, but we're damn sure not going to give it to the legislature.
Right. Now, so this is I think is a super interesting thing, and I think we should have Julie Bisbee on here to talk about it. She's the director of TSET. I will admit that I have maligned TSET on Twitter on occasion, and Julie reached out and was like, hey, can we have coffee and talk about this? I was like, yeah, sure. And part of the issue that I saw is what the legislature said as well, right, is that it seems that some of the outcome measures are unable to be measured, which is true, right? Like how it's difficult to assess public sentiment and some of these things. And also it's not like it is not a true scientific measure because you can't control for certain things. Now, what we do know, these are the facts, Scott. Oklahoma is top 10 for tobacco cessation spending, right? So we spend more than 40 other states on tobacco cessation. However, we are still, and we have been for a while. However, we are also top 10 for adult and youth smoking rates. I think we're 40th for adults and like 44th highest for youth smoking rates. So TSET has been around for, 20 years? And they've been doing this stuff for a long time. And yet, we're still here with high rates. Now, people will cite, oh, well, but it is cultural for Native Americans, and it's this and that. But this is not the case. I remember an episode, I have to go back and look, we talked about this on the show because the Department of Mental Health's funding, a portion of their funding is tied to the youth smoking rate. And we were in jeopardy probably 3 years ago that if we did not lower the youth smoking rate, we would lose funding for the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
And now the rest of the story. Like Paul Harvey, right?
That's right. Yeah.
No. All valid points. I think TSET does a pretty good job, and I'm not going to say they can't do some things better. I would say one thing: quitting smoking, really, really hard.
Yeah,
like it's really hard.
Nicotine is more addictive than heroin. I heard. I read.
It's incredibly addictive. It's also this is not 100% true, but most smokers live in a household where somebody else smokes too. And so like you got to get everybody to quit, or like the person that you just get to quit is also going to keep smoking. Right. Yeah. So that's a big part of it. Kids see their parents smoke, and like kids want to do what adults do. So they start using tobacco.
Right.
Vaping is not helping things either. So, I hear the like, well, they spend all this money and people still smoke. Totally true. 100% true. But it's not to say that I think that's not money well spent, but it takes more than that.
You're right.
To measurably impact smoking. And the most important thing is, I literally have this conversation with patients every day. To get somebody to quit smoking, they have to want to quit smoking.
Right.
And so there's just a lot,
So could there be anything that the legislature themselves could do from a policy perspective to help de-incentivize smokers.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the thought that they could raise the tobacco tax.
What?
Which is right. Which is like not an unreasonable thing to do at all. You know, as a doctor, yeah, man, tax the shit out of it, right?
Didn't they raise the tax a couple of years ago?
Yeah, so they raised it as part of that part of the House Bill 1010XX, right? That raised all that money. What?
Was that step up?
Well, it was proposed as part of Step Up, but it was also included in 1010XX, right? Because Step Up didn't pass, right?
Right, and then there was like step up plus or plus, and then it evolved into 1010XX.
Yeah, but and the deal was like that was a thought was that they could raise the tobacco tax. Democrats largely did not want to only raise the tobacco tax because it is correctly seen as a regressive tax policy, right? It disproportionately affects people at the of lesser
Economic means.
yeah. And so, you know, as a doctor, yeah, man, I'm never gonna oppose the tobacco tax, and certainly, and data has shown that tobacco taxes are they're effective, and I actually I will do this with patients. Like I'll have patients come in and I'll say, you know, how much you ready to quit smoking? No, I don't think so. All right, well, hey, just curious, how much a pack of cigarettes now? And they'll say about $7. And I'll say, you're smoking how many packs a day? They'll say, oh, you know, about a pack a day. And I'm like, all right, so that's $70 every 10 days. Yeah, so that's $210 a month. Yeah, so that's $2,600 a year. And they just kind of look at me and they're like, yeah, I guess so. And I'm like, hey, man, I could use an extra $2,600 a year.
Right.
Like, that's a vacation. And you talk to people in those terms and say, like I'm not going to sit here and twist your arm if you're not ready to quit smoking. But, like, that's $2,600.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like, and if I remember correctly, when the legislature changed the tax a few years ago, there had been discussion about increasing the tax to $1.50 a pack, which is a steep tax, right? And they ended up passing it at $1.
$1.10, something like that.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, the issue was that passing the tax at $1 does a lot for the state budget, but does very little for dissuading smokers. Like the break point for reducing the number of smokers was at $1.50 or something close to that. And so what the legislature effectively did was raise money without decrease the number of smokers.
Yeah.
Now, if you're trying to raise money, that makes sense. You don't want people to quit, right?
Yeah.
And I just on a broader sense, I think this is an issue that is really interesting on a personal level, probably for you and I and all of our listeners, right? Where we feel a tension within ourselves about our policy priorities, right? We want to reduce smoking. We know it is good for a myriad of reasons, right? We also don't want taxes to disproportionately affect, poor people, right? And so it's like, well, what do we do? Like, we want this, we don't want that, but they are mutually exclusive in this situation.
I mean, and then there's the like cold hard calculus, the calculus that I don't know if the legislature made this calculus or not, but that, man, if we raise the tax too much, it's not actually going to raise any money because nobody's going to buy cigarettes. Right. But, you know, the flip side of that is, too, if you get a bunch of people to quit smoking, I don't have the data to prove this. You could do it wouldn't be too hard to do the analysis. I'm sure somebody's done it, probably an okay policy. But you cut the smoking rate in half, I bet that you would see a disproportionate impact on Medicaid spending relatively quickly, right? Like you could see, you know, in terms of medications for COPD, treatment for lung cancer, doctor visits, you know, COPD exacerbate. I mean, there's like all kinds of stuff that healthcare spending that would drop dramatically. So if you're thinking for like the long term from a like good for people and good fiscal policy, then the best policy is to get people to quit smoking. But there is going to be a short-term disproportionate impact on, you know, smokers, obviously, and demographically, that's going to hit people that are, you know, kind of of less means.
Yeah. On the chance that our listeners can hear me coughing in the background while you're speaking.
He's got COVID.
It is neither COVID nor smoking, for that matter. In fact, my daughter started daycare recently, and as any COVID baby will tell you, They've never been exposed to any diseases, so she got a routine virus, which she promptly gave to me. And that's also why my voice sounds a little thin today. 2 days ago, man, I didn't have a voice at all. Like on Wednesday, I could not. I had to like physically shout to be heard on Zoom calls, and that was embarrassing. And it was very bad.
I'm sorry. That sucks.
That's all right. I'm mostly better.
As he coughs again.
That's right. Yeah. So I guess in somewhat big news, was that last week?
I mean, supposedly big news if it actually happens.
But potentially. We talked about this last week, didn't we?
I don't think. Did we talk about it on the show?
I don't remember.
You and I talked about it extensively.
Well, I figured that. Yes.
off the air. I can't remember if we talked about it on the show or not.
Yeah. So Canoo, a electric vehicle. I guess they're not entirely electronic because there are mechanical components. So, electric vehicle company has publicly chosen Pryor, Oklahoma, as the home of their new vehicle production facility.
It's pronounced Pryor.
Pryor. All right. Well, this will allegedly also bring up or create up to 2,000 jobs in Pryor. Because I Googled this. It was a population of only 9,000-ish people.
No, you didn't Google that. You Googled the population of where they're closing the jail in the county. You Googled the Blaine County, I think.
Well, okay, man, it all runs together. I'll blame the mucus in my head. Anyway, so the state offered a bunch of incentives, right? Which is normal.
Like $300 million worth of incentives.
Well, that's what Canoo said, but the state won't confirm it.
Which is against the law.
Well, yes and no. All right, so I'm going to put on my FOI Oklahoma hat here. So there are exceptions in the open records law. So, first of all, the records have been requested by several news outlets, including the Oklahoman and CNHI and others. And the Department of Commerce, the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, said, we don't have to give that to you yet because the deal is not signed. And anything to do with like negotiations and some of that, it does not have to be released yet. So the Oklahoman has a good story on it that basically says like, we will find out, but it could be years because what the state has said is the incentives are based on performance. So basically Canoo has to do certain things in order to receive these incentives. So the only person that is mentioned a figure is the CEO of Canoo, who, if you look up their SEC filings and do a little due diligence, Canoo is not entirely without blemish.
No, and they're not that big of a company either.
No, have they actually produced any vehicles?
I don't think that they have. I believe, if I understand it correctly, currently they have a design for a vehicle that's being produced elsewhere because they don't have their own factory.
It's in Canada, right?
Yes, so that's number one. Number two,
which is okay. First of all, how Canadian of a move to have a vehicle in your country, it's produced in Canada and it's called Canoo.
I mean, I love the Canadians. But what is Canoo right now employs what like 50 people, a couple hundred people, something like. They don't employ that many people. So this is a truly exponential growth in their workforce. It takes their production capacity from 0 to full. And they've been sued a couple of times? They've had some stuff going on that doesn't make it look like they're 100% on the up and up. And so, I'm all for bringing jobs to Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I'm all for anything that diversifies our economy. And I think it would be very good for there to be good paying jobs in rural Oklahoma that are not dependent on oil and gas. Right. I think that would be good for most of all those communities, but good for any number of other reasons. But I'm just a little skeptical. I'm a little skeptical that this is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So I 100% agree. If this happens, it is tremendous for the state, certainly for the community of Pryor, but there are some big questions out there, right? And in fact, even as late as last December, right? So literally just 6 months ago, Canoo had made some announcements because they went public, I think, last December, and so they their first vehicle was like this subscription only van, and then they were like, oh, okay, we're not going to make that after all.
How do you subscribe to a van?
Well, I think it it's, I imagine it's kind of like one of those music subscription CD company things back in the 90s where they just keep mailing you vans every month and you can't quit.
I mean, if it's not a van, I could be into that.
You buy 5, get 1 free. BGM, was that one of them? Do you remember those CD subscription things? It was like a huge coup.
I mean, I remember going to Sam Goody's and just buying CDs with my allowance.
What was your first CD you purchased? Do you remember? This will be good.
Yeah. It was let me make sure I get the right.
I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours.
Yeah, well, so I can tell you the first the first cassette tape that I bought with my own money was Rope in the Wind by Garth Brooks. And the first...
Tell me you're Oklahoman without telling me you're Oklahoman.
And the first CD that I bought was And the Music Speaks by by R&B group All for One.
Oh, yeah.
In 1995.
Excellent. Well done. My first, I'll go now. My first cassette was either MC Hammer or Vanilla Ice. Pretty sure it's MC Hammer.
Nice.
His, I assume You Can't Touch This, that whatever album that was on. It could have been Too Legit to Quit, but my first CD was Nirvana's Bleach album.
Oh, solid.
Most people don't own it.
So I'll tell you the first there's one CD that I was given as a gift. I want to say it was for my birthday. I think when I don't remember what age I was, but
Michael Bolton.
No, it was
With a man.
no, that was not it. No, my cousin gave me Third Eye Blind, their debut album, and I was just like, whoa.
Right.
Like that was like I listened to that album and I was like, it truly and it's funny because Ashley will tell you this too, because that's one of her favorite albums of all time. That was a formative album for her. Another one for me was man, I'm dating myself. The Goo Goo Dolls, both Boy Named Goo and Dizzy Up the Girl were purchases of mine. Both albums that I still listen to.
This tracks
25 years later.
This tracks everything I know about Scott. I could totally picture you in high school listening to that.
Yeah.
When I was in, we'll move on after this, but when I was in high school, probably a senior, I came up here to the college I eventually attended, Southern Nazarene University, and it was for like the fall college days visit thing, and they schedule like a big talent show during that time, or maybe it was their lip sync contest thing they did every year. And I was here with my girlfriend, who was also going to attend SNU, and obviously we broke up after our freshman year, but so we're in the chapel, right, for this like lip sync, and in between acts they're playing popular music, and they played some Goo Goo Dolls song, I forgot, and everyone's singing along. It's like dark, and it was such a happy like kumbaya moment. And my girlfriend's like, what song is this? Because she grew up listening to only like contemporary Christian music.
Is that when you broke up with her? Because it should have been.
No, it was almost a year later, because she didn't believe in dinosaurs.
I mean, that's also a good reason.
I mean, there was more to it, but that came out in that final conversation, and that I think she broke up with me actually, but I was fine with it. And then that like came up in the conversation, and I was like, "What? This is a weird turn, but okay, no problem, no problem."
How did we get on this, man?
Way off. Let's go back. This is what happens when we talk about canoes, right?
I mean, yeah. All that to say, I mean, we'll see. I I hope it happens. I hope it happens for the people of Pryor. I hope it happens for the state of Oklahoma. I hope it happens for electric vehicles in America. Like, I hope it's a good deal, but I'm skeptical.
It could be, yeah. Canoo seems like a little too trendy. Like their name and the spelling with the two O's and the everything. Also, it came to Oklahoma. This whole thing happened because allegedly the Tulsa World had an article, I think today, that former U.S. Senator Don Nichols, who's from Oklahoma, had tipped off the governor and his office to the Department of Commerce to the possibility of the deal because someone he knows or is related to was like on the board of Canoo, and they were like, "Hey, you should check into this." And maybe Nichols was on the board and told someone to call. Anyway, it was a connection that seemed legitimate, and like we said, if it happens, great. If not, you heard it here first.
Yeah, I could get really into this. Is only tangentially related. I could maybe get into those electric Ford F-150s.
The new Lightning.
Yeah, those look pretty cool.
Yeah, Peter McKinnon's got a YouTube video about it. I need to watch.
Like, it looks pretty cool. But anyway, lastly on our list this week, we still don't have an attorney general. Word on the street is that it might be after the July 4th holiday before we get one. So we'll see. There are multiple candidates. There's Ryan Leonard, who is currently a Governor Stitt's special counsel for Native American Affairs. I don't know Mr. Leonard. I'm sure he's a great lawyer. I feel like the governor's track record on Native American Affairs is not great, so I don't know.
Well, so that's the deal, right? Like the governor is going to want someone to back him up with all this McGirt business. And from what I hear, Leonard might be the front runner.
No idea. I did learn something last night. Did you know that to be Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, you have to have lived in Oklahoma for 10 years?
I didn't. That's an interesting thing,
Yeah.
considering how many other judicial appointments you can have and not even be
A lawyer.
Yeah.
Tim Downing, who previously was Governor Stitt's counsel for Secretary of State. Then he became a U.S. attorney. And then when President Biden took office, he resigned, which actually, I think we talked to you were like, that's kind of weird. I don't think that is that weird. I think actually, I think it is because it was a big deal during the Bush administration, right? That like I think when he won re-election, asked for the resignation of like all the U.S. attorneys because because they serve at the pleasure of the president. And
I'm sick of you guys. Get out of here.
Well, I think though, but it's kind of, I think that's I could be wrong, and I've got a source I'll ask about this. I think it's kind of a thing where when a new president gets elected, oftentimes U.S. attorneys like offer their resignation, and sometimes it's maybe accepted, and sometimes it's not. I guess Mr. Downing's was, or maybe he was like, "I'm not working for you."
Right. Well, I mean, in some ways that's weird. In some ways it's comforting, right? Like because there's a lot of hubbub about all these, Trump judicial related appointments. But if it's like tradition that they step down, it also is bananas to me that we would be changing over so many thousands of positions every 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Trisha Everest also in the running, who was Secretary for Public Safety and is currently she resigned.
Yeah,
as the chair of the jail trust, right?
She has some other. Well, and then she led the No campaign against the criminal justice reform measures.
There's Greg Mashburn and AJ. Is it AJ Ferret? How do you say
his last name? Yeah.
Some local, and then Gittner Drummond, who ran against former Attorney General Hunter in 2018. I just want to say, I'm looking at our outline. I feel like there's been an omission.
Who's that?
There's somebody who's not on this list.
Tell me.
Well, I would tell you, but I don't know if I don't think I can because
we don't have the music.
The iPod's dead and we don't have the music.
Yeah, it's an iPad, first of all, because it's 2021. And yes, Scott Pruitt. I don't even know.
I mean, I'm sure he won't be, but like.
Well, today I had a discussion with some folks about the idea of pulling together a panel of speakers that are all former AGs. So you'd have Drew Edmondson, you'd have Mike Hunter, you'd have Scott Pruitt, and one other person. I can't think of who it is, but I was just like, can you... Mike Turpin.
Yeah.
So you got Edmondson, Turpin, Hunter, and Pruitt, right? Like I feel like that is the four quadrants of some kind of
Something.
chart. Like Turpin is probably like the chaotic good, and then Pruitt is the chaotic bad, right? And
If we do that, when you announce Scott Pruitt's name, I want to play the damn music.
right. I think I told him we
And
should.
then Scott Pruitt's gonna be like, what's this music?
Right. Yeah.
Let me tell you, sir. You know, it's interesting. I would be curious. I've met Drew several times and spent some time with him. I've never met Mike Turpin or Scott Pruitt. I'd be interested. We interviewed Attorney General Hunter for the show. I don't feel like I'm an easily intimidated person. Attorney General Hunter was an intimidating man.
Really?
That I felt like that was not in like a bad, like he wasn't a jerk or like he was super nice and like super like personable and answered all of our questions and gave us an hour at a time, and I'm still grateful that he came on the show. But I was just like sitting next to him and I was like, I feel like you are someone who is not to be trifled with.
Well, that's fair. That's funny. I thought he was very personable as well. I did not feel intimidated. Some of it, though, I think was because we were in his office in that like library room,
surrounded
with the
by
big table,
giant books.
Yeah, but he was very affable, and I thought
he was great, and he gave us a ton of time and answered all our questions. It was awesome.
Listeners, please go back and listen to that. That was about the opioid lawsuit.
Yeah.
Which his legacy is. I think he was hoping that was going to be a legacy issue, but it was a little bit tarnished from the get-go, and obviously when you resign from office, it doesn't bode well for your legacy.
Yeah.
All right, well,
that about does it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's important to note as we near the end of the episode here that not next week, but the week after, the legislature is going to start hosting their congressional redistricting town halls. So they will start on July 8th, and it's basically every Tuesday, Thursday for the month of July. So they're all at 6 p.m. They're doing 5 in-person plus 2 virtual ones. So July 8th is in Oklahoma City. July 13th is virtual. They'll use Microsoft Teams, I presume, like always. July 20th will be in Enid. July 22nd is in Tulsa. July 27th is in McAllister. July 29th is in Lawton. And then they'll end on August 3rd with another virtual one. All of this is a lead up to the Census Bureau's expected release of the full census data on August 16th, I think. And so they're doing these town hall meetings. Listeners, I encourage you strongly to attend as many of them as you can. They're all open to the public. The virtual ones are more convenient, I guess, because you can log on from your computer. And in those, you can ask questions. But I'm going to try to go to all of these. Do you want to go to some? If you're interested. I know 6 o'clock is difficult for you on a Tuesday, Thursday.
I actually would. I probably would not be able to make, the Enid or Tulsa or McAllister or honestly Lawton, but I could go to the first one.
Oklahoma City one. What's appropriate? Yeah. That's where you live. Right. Okay, cool. Well, let's go. If listeners, if you are planning to attend any of these and you're not sure what to ask or what to look for, hit me up, right? So send us an email, podcast@letsfixthis.org is an easy way. You can email me, Andy@letsfixthis.org. That's fine too. It all comes to the same inbox, honestly. Or hit me up on Twitter @AndyOKC or @letsfixthisok. These are very important. In the past, when they have done the redistricting town halls for the state legislative districts, it was more of an information session. They would say, here's what we're doing, here's the reason why, like here's why we do redistricting, here's how we're going to do it. And they just kind of shared some information, but there wasn't really like an information gathering segment. And that's the piece that I really feel like they missed on. And this is, I will now put on my people, not politicians hat. If the legislature was serious about drawing districts that reflect the public, hell, they might ask a question. What do y'all think? what are the communities that we should protect? What, like how do you feel these lines should be drawn? They don't. They're just like, oh, here's what we're going to do. Great. Thanks for coming. If you have any questions, stick around. But it's not really it's not like a focus group. I mean, it's a presentation. It takes about 20 minutes and then they're out the door.
Yeah. I mean, I think that these are all important. I think that people should go. I think they should, I think we should take the opportunity to make our voices heard. I think there's a lot of things they can and should do better.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, if you would like to attend any of those, all the information is on the People Not Politicians website. You go to peoplenotpoliticians.org peoplenotpoliticians.org, and then click on events. I loaded them all into Eventbrite, so you can get the information there, put it on your calendar really easily. The legislature doesn't make it super easy to find, but we try to help you out.
It's almost like they don't want people to come.
Yeah, you're right. It's like they're slow playing the public engagement piece. Well, on that note, listeners, thank you for being here. Thanks for listening with us. Scott and I are going to sit here for a moment and make a list of potential guests over the summer. Some of them will be candidates for office. Some of them will be advocates like yourselves. If you're interested in being on the podcast, please send us an email at podcast@letsfixthisok.org. We'd love to talk to you for a little bit. We could do a call-in show or a live show.
That'd be awesome.
It's about time. We should hit up the folks at New State Burgers and do another live show.
They would love it.
It's 1,000 degrees, but we'll make it happen.
Yeah,
we can do that. All right. Listeners, don't forget, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a good week.